Happy Thursday evening, everybody. Got a cool drawing here for you guys. We're just going to kick everything off with that. Got a special guest today, Blake Davis with Monster Mill. You guys probably saw the logo around, just a few posts here and there, and some stuff like that. But I really just wanted to formally introduce him to the group and to the contest and everybody that's around the bow hunting league. Um, we are we are right in the beginning of the turkey contest. I'm gonna adjust the title here real quick. I'm not fancy. Y'all know this. All right. Had a weird title on there. Okay. There we go. All right. So we're right in the beginning of the turkey contest. We've got, oh shoot, I think we have about 7 birds already entered. It's amazing, all the guys that are already hunting, traveling to hunt, going down to Florida. We have 4 teams that have hit the board already, so it's pretty sweet. We'll give you guys an update on that here in the next. What's up, John? On the next, probably next week, we'll get the first scoreboard rolled out. I know a lot of you guys are waiting to get your season started out, but we want to get you guys an update real quick. So, as you can see, we have the wheel full of names here, and I'm gonna I tell you what, we'll do the first roll for the guys that did the reveal your kill post. As you guys know, we did we're doing a drawing for a X Pro camera, a reveal by Tactacam X Pro camera, for everyone that shared their kill and their reveal pick of their kill. Just a way for us to support those that support Reveal, that support us. So it's really cool. So we're going to do that drawing right now. I believe we had 15, 13, something like that. People do that drawings, participate in that contest. So let's do that one real quick. See who wins this camera. I'm going to mail it to you on Saturday. It'll probably be the first opportunity I get to mail it to you. All right, so Whitetail Hype won. So Whitetail Hype is a couple guys that do some filming. They're just really just doing it because they have a passion for it. But he made his post. I met those guys at the Mobile Hunter Expo in, I believe, I can't remember if it was the Southern show or the Michigan show last year, but we met those guys, and super good guys. So got you a free cell cam. That's freaking awesome. So appreciate you. Appreciate everybody that participated. Let me close that out. I'm gonna close this one out. All right. So we have a drawing. So we had 210 hunters that submitted reveal picks along with their entries. We had 722 submissions this year. We had over 92,000 inches of antler entered. And so we have 3 of these X Pro cameras going to one lucky winner. So let me roll this list real quick and see who our winner is. Levon Overholt. So Levon, I will reach out to you and get those cameras sent out to you. Congratulations on killing a buck, and congratulations on getting him on camera and entering in this random drawing for the 3 X Pro cameras, $450 in cameras. So I'm going to shut the screen down here. Should just be me and Blake. So there's Blake. It's been pretty quiet. How you doing tonight, Blake?
Good. It's good to finally connect. You and I have had kind of a bumpy road in the last year. So, and no one's fault, just like we have been the victims of circumstance for, I think it's almost a year that we started talking.
No joke. I feel like every week we talk a little bit and say, hey, let's get on the phone and make phone call, and we can't even sacrifice 30 minutes for each other. It's funny. I think one meeting I had something come up that was urgent, and tried to get up with you, and then but I couldn't make it. And then the last time you sent me a text, man, I forgot all about the call. I had this come up. So a lot of stuff. We have a lot of things that happen with families and things like that, and that's part of having a good partnership, and just being reasonable. You know what I'm saying? Like, we work together on these things. Things happen. This stuff. I'm not going anywhere. You aren't going anywhere. So that's good.
It is, and it was funny because the tie into bow hunting league there is, I have a general, and really, I kind of upper echelon people with prizes or things like that. And so when I heard about bow hunting league, I was like, another competition. I started to look at it a little bit, because we have mutual friends at Reveal and Tacticam, and I was like, okay, I can get behind this. It's kind of regular people doing what they love to do, in a little bit of an organized format. And then as you and I started talking about it, it's like you never have the same winners, you never have the same, but people like to participate. At the end of the day, I'm 53. I've gone through hunter really. I have kids of my age, and it's as much to me about preserving hunting and having fun doing it, a little friendly competition, with some benefits. I mean, you get, honestly, you make it fun to be part of the club, and so Monster ties into that, and that we're just as nerdy as I can get about white-tailed deer and nutrition. Anybody can use the products, and they're simply laid out, and we don't make crazy promises that antlers are going to grow on does, and you're going to grow a 300-pound buck in Florida or anything. We just build solid nutritional products for everyday people that they're on the upper end of the price scale, but anyone where they're legal to use can improve any piece of property that they have, and that's what Monster Meal was designed for. I can go into the back history of it if you want, but overall, it's just, at the end of the day, we're all hunters, and most of us hunt. We would hunt. I got thrown into a situation about 4 years ago. Actually, no, it was out of the blue in August, and I hadn't hunted public land in a long while, and I just started to enjoy hunting again because there was no expectations, there was no
right,
and it really was a big reset for me. So I mean, you span from kind of the upper echelon of big buck killers who just wants to join, and everybody can win.
right.
So it's kind of a cool platform.
Yeah, it's neat. As this thing grows and as we go along, we just continue. We're able to just continue to just reward folks just for participating, just like the little drawing we just did. We just did 2 drawings, and all they had to do was participate in the contest. And that's we can keep that feel and keep those prizes going, as well as we have the big time winners. And it's, you never know when you're going to have the best season of your life. Our top team this year, it's 2 brothers and their buddy, and they all live within 15 minutes of each other, and they put up the biggest score we've ever had. They're just Southern Kentucky boys, but like I said, it's we try to keep it relaxed. Never cost anybody anything to get in, so we just try to keep it fun and keep the right feel for it. The best thing I've seen though out of everything is the trading the hunts and guys hunting together, and I hunt with over 20 different guys every year from the league, just across different states and stuff. But So I heard you. It wasn't with the bow this year, but I heard you killed a big deer. Were you in Kansas? Where were you at?
My biggest antler wise was in Kansas. I actually had a heck of a year. I killed a Pope and Young quality deer. I've never scored him, but he's right there, 4.5-year-old 8-point from New York with my bow. Killed him the very first sit of the season.
And that's something.
And, and it was funny because it was in a spot that I was planning on going to. I really wanted to go somewhere, and another guy from our club, don't worry about it, I'll just scoot out. It's early, right? First part of October, and I very rarely tag out. So I started there first night. The problem with that is that even though we're a $2 state, we have a rule on our club that it's $1 only.
Okay.
So I was done. Like first day, first night, mature deer, I was happy. My season was really. And then I've never been on a guided whitetail hunt. I'm 53 years old. I've worked in the industry forever. I've never been on a guided whitetail hunt. So then I got to go to Saskatchewan with Dean Partridge, who we work with Monster Mail, have for about 5 years. And he asked me to kill a deer with a crossbow. I've killed deer with a crossbow. I've never killed a buck with a crossbow.
Mm-hmm.
So I killed just a spectacular buck that's, and the experience was awesome because you're as far north as whitetails live where Dean is. And then I go to Kansas because I drew a muzzleloader tag in Kansas, and the owner of Monster Mail and I went. He saw some tremendous deer. He actually missed one the first night. We just kind of rolled in, and I didn't see a buck that I wanted to kill. And trust me, I am not the guy that's I like the weird ones. Like if they're old and they're unique, like I don't care what they were. Where I shot my big buck in December, there was a 6-point there that was, he's mid-30s all day long, and he's probably crowding 140 because he's just super beams, super mass. He probably got 28, 29-inch beams. He is giant.
Wow. Yeah.
And old just, and I told the outfitter he's also been using Monster Mail for a long time, and we've been friends for 5 years. I just told him, I said, that buck shows up, I'm smoking him. Like, I'll move over to that farm just for him. And this other deer had shown up. The deer I shot had shown up a couple nights before, and we were using reveals actually. So I got to shamelessly plug them, but it's I use them because I can turn them on and turn them off. And
yeah,
I there's guys that are camera wizards. If they give me a picture, I'm happy. And
right.
And the Lord blessed me that the right deer showed up. I had my muzzleloader, because the unique thing about a Kansas muzzleloader tag is that if you don't kill a deer during muzzleloader season, you're allowed to use your muzzleloader during the rifle season on the same tag. So I went back and wound up killing that deer, and happened to be with 2 of the guys from my club here in New York. So it was a great hunt. And one of the other guys killed a 164-inch deer.
Oh, wow. Some big deer on that place.
Oh, Steve has exceptional deer, and he's kind of he and the guys from The Way It Was, if you never checked them out, they have a great little show. A couple of older gentlemen who invested in land for their family. They're in Coldwater in St. John, Kansas. Those guys are big buck killers. I think since they've been with us, I think they've killed 7 gross Boone and Crockett deer. And they're in their 70s. Like, these guys are killers.
Wow, that's a bunch.
And they've got the right property, but they've they manage it extremely well. Everything, protein, minerals, feed, the whole thing, age structure, but they still hunt with their grandkids, and that's what it's for, and that's what I really like about them. But our Kansas deer have performed extremely well on our protein program, and I'm kind of more a biology guy. I just want to help deer, right? If in my home state, I can't use any of it, which is kind of weird, but
Yeah.
So we work with places where we can, and you had mentioned that the team that won was from South Kentucky.
Hmm.
We used to maintain a lease. They just changed the feed laws last year in
So you're
Kentucky.
in one. You changed the feed laws in one of the counties that is close to that CWD zone in Tennessee. Is that what you're talking about?
No, they actually statewide made it so that you can't feed protein between March 15th and August 15th.
That's correct. I remember that
So,
now. Mhm.
so we had a testing facility, 1,000 acres in Union County. Great family that we've worked with for years. But if I can't feed, and our neighbor is a great guy, works for the DNR from Kentucky, I'm not going to put him in a position, and where I'm breaking the law right next to him.
Yeah, that's right.
So we won't be going back there, and I really don't know. I will be. I think the only hunt I have planned this year is Saskatchewan, but that's with a different outfitter, and an indigenous First Nation outfitter,
Oh, nice.
who's been feeding our stuff for 2 years and really likes it. So
If you have an opportunity to go to Saskatchewan, you need to go. that's kind I remember when I first started seeing videos come out of there, and back when VHS and DVD, all the hunt, vids and stuff were out, and they were so big. I remember when all those things came out, and man, that was some unreal stuff, and that's definitely on the list. That's one year I'm going to be up there for sure.
it's I've been blessed to hunt a lot of different states and all over the place. And for me anymore, it's about where I'm going, who I'm
Hmm.
going to be, kind of thing. Most of
Hmm.
my hunts have been like yours, where they're just trade hunts. I know somebody,
Yeah.
or we'll swap hunts. I'll get them to New York or one of our Kentucky places, and I've had
Hmm.
properties to hunt in other states too, and we would just kind of swap. Some of my best friends, uh, we hardly ever hunt together, but we talk all the time.
Yep.
I've got a guy from Wisconsin who is a big buck serial killer, the quietest, nicest guy you ever met, but like he is just miserable on whitetails. I mean, he has killed some. He killed a boon. I don't think he's ever scored it, but I'm certain if my buck is in that boon deer, his buck is in that boon deer, um and he killed it with a bow. So it's like,
Hmm.
it's amazing.
Yeah.
But
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Like I agree. I mean, I talked to. There's really probably about 10 guys I talk to on a weekly basis that I've never met. It's just, you get in these, you get in the, I don't want to say industry thing, because these guys are nowhere, and they have no affiliation with any company or anything, but you're getting around the right people. You just find a way of linking up. And the thing is, you can be friends with them. And I've been friends with some of these guys for 5 years, and you just gravitate to people that like kind of quality. That's one thing. I mean, that's one thing about the league that's so strong, is just the networking. And I mean, I can see it a lot with like our turkey contest. We do. Um, these guys build their own teams. They've got teams of 20 this year, and um, I mean, they'll bring 15 guys. I bring 14 guys with them, and so many hunts get traded, and and all those guys are keyed in on each other's season too. So you've got all these, like, you've got, I think we have 11 teams this year, and what happens is all those teams are following each other and talking to each other. They may not be talking to anybody else about the stuff, but they're talking to each other about it. It's cool. You build these friendships, and a lot of these guys have been on the same team for 3 or 4 years, so it's cool.
well,
Yeah.
the other thing is your structure is loose enough that it no there's just really not a lot of incentive to run on the edge of the rules, right?
Hmm.
Rules are
Right.
just about shoot your deer. You can register them however you need to, and if your team happens to get lucky, you win the notoriety.
Hmm.
I've made my living in this industry since 2012. I've been around this industry. I grew up in it. And there's a lot of the aspects of the industry where it is today that are not as good for the industry as they were when I was a kid. But there's an awful lot of good people in the industry that participate in hunting, and friendly rivalries or just sharing your success. I was at a seminar a while ago, and sometimes the inch guys creep in, and that they're pretty protective of using an inch to gauge a deer, and and I used to be the same way, so I can't. I'm not. I'm not standing on my soapbox here.
Right.
It was the only metric we had, right?
Right.
But as you experience things and you talk to other people, rather than listening to internet chat and posts and social media, you find out that there's a lot more in common than there is not in common. And
right.
you kind of, I don't like people who do not celebrate when other people win.
Right. Exactly.
Like as you age, it becomes very distasteful. Being competitive is fine. It's good natured competition is hard to find in today's world. So when I started to dig into Bowhunter League, I was just really happy that this is something I can get behind. I don't have to go to some fancy banquet, and I don't have to $1,000 to do it. And there's not people upset because the way they scored a deer they didn't agree with and they lost because of it. And I've seen that happen too. And that was just none of us is curing cancer here. We're hunting deer. So let's keep it in perspective.
Yeah, there's a somebody said, "What's up, Blake?" But the way my comments come in, so I don't even know who it is. So you can say hi to them, I guess. Hi, person we don't know.
Hi, whoever you are. I'm doing well. It's been a crazy week, but all my weeks are crazy. And if you know me, you know that. So
what's cool is this is just on our channels and stuff, so somebody knows who you are out there. So we'll be able to see later who made the comment. It may be somebody pulling your leg. But so tell me, so you kind of opened up Pandora's box there, and said, hey, you don't have to tell me any names, but tell me one of the things, like an industry story where something was really distasteful and you just watched something. And it doesn't have to be companies you work for or anything, just something you saw. Because I always want the juice, man. I like hearing that stuff. It's pretty wild, some of the things you hear.
I won't use any names. I don't, we don't need to gossip about it.
Right.
But literally, I've had industry people steal leases from me.
Oh, nice.
When they were invited
to
become a member of the lease.
And,
I've lost good property in the state of Iowa to people who were invited in good faith. And that was really an eye opener for me. That was like, he was a supposed close personal friend of a close personal friend of mine. And that was just like when you invest, I'm not an affluent guy. When you invest the time and energy it takes to drive halfway across the country to wait to draw a tag in Iowa, to the point that our club was structured so that we would all apply for points until we got through. And there was 2 people that would hunt the lease every year, and they would have 3 points and be able to draw.
That's a good system.
Yeah. And, as long as everybody trusts each other and there's no infighting or competitive hunting, we had a very good group of guys. We had one guy have to back out for personal reasons. And one of the guys said, hey, I got this guy. You can invite him in. He's really cool. He's, he's this and he's that. And, I've been around the industry. I've met some very good people in the industry, but I've also seen some people that they let their egos get out in front of them. And sometimes I think people just get misled down a road where the pressure to perform, especially for
Yeah.
out TV people, you've got to have content. You've got to have relative content. And if you don't, one, you take it personally, and number two, you risk sponsorship money, and you've worked very hard to manufacture this dream, or maybe you didn't work hard and you just manufactured a dream, but nobody wants to lose it.
Right.
It's distasteful. And I've been in camp with people who the overall perception of them is that they're pretty solid people, and
Mhm.
I've been
Yeah.
disappointed. And and that's
Mhm.
people in general, though.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's unique to this industry. I just think this industry is so small that when stuff like that happens, everybody hears about it.
Everybody. Yep.
You know,
And I've seen scenarios. I'm just close enough to these circuits that I'll hear stories, and a lot of times it'll come from sponsors. Just like, hey, man, let me tell you what happened with this guy, and the whole everybody in the world outside of that small circle thinks that person is just good as gold, and I don't really understand how it stays in. I don't understand how those stories don't get out, but I guess it's just because people, I guess lawyers are a thing, and people decide not to like totally out them on some things. But yeah, it's crazy. It's absolutely wild. Somebody will mess somebody over and then be good. But yeah, like you said, I'd say our one thing, running a company like Monster Mill, you know, handling bow hunting league, we probably get similar things. Like we attract the wrong people sometimes, and it can skew our view just of people in general. But I've always said, I always said, I've over the last 3 years or so, I figured out it's about 97% of people are just regular, you know, mild tempered, regular people that just want to go deer hunting, and don't really expect anything out of you. Don't and they in the same turn they don't feel like you expect anything out of them. But you get that 3%, man. They really put a bad taste in your mouth, and it can ruin an event for you. If you're not careful. But and that's just like with and I, the business side stuff. I mean, it happens with. I'm sure it happens with dealers sometimes, or potential dealers and things like that too. You just literally it's just business, and but we have yeah, but I'm excited to work with you just because I've seen just how me and you work together, and both of us are just kind of like, hey, let's make it happen. We'll get there when we get there. And I'm excited to see how many picks I get a deer this year. Like I've done the corn pile surveys, and do those things like when everybody else is doing them, and it's so popular for guys to throw corn out, and that stuff's gone quick. So like a lot of time, the way I'm looking at it, like, hey, I need a few things that will last and hang around. That's why I'm excited about the feed blocks. About using some blocks that way. So there's something staying there that has attractant in it. So there's a couple things I'm interested in looking at, but main things I just want to get more pics of deer. Like
well,
I
and
need to know what's around.
you
But
know, it brings up a good point in that people automatically assume that because I work for a company that makes an attractant that I hunt over bait all the time, and I'm too lazy to hunt over bait. I don't like carrying it in. Now, there are times where, especially if I'm on a big cornfield, I will try to influence deer traffic um, towards a predominant wind pattern
mhm.
so that I can get them closer for a shot or whatever. But like the general overreaching, we get hammered all the time on social media about, oh, you're a slob hunter, you're this, you're that, the
Right.
other. And every product we have was developed by a PhD animal nutritionist who was also a deer hunter.
Right.
And he also worked for the fourth largest agricultural feed manufacturer in the United States. And they still manufacture our stuff for us and ship off their dock. But the one thing he noticed was that deer will eat a lot of things. So like
Right.
it's not brain surgery to throw something out that a deer will eat and they'll eat it. Like, it's like sticking a pie on a table in front of me. I'm gonna, right? And then it may not be good for me, but I
Right.
will eat. Where there was ways to incorporate it, and it led him down this rabbit hole of the product that became our attractant, because there's a lot of attractants out in the market that deer are drawn to, but they can't return to them all the time because
Right.
they'll overeat them and it'll cause digestive upset. Or they get nothing out of them. There's a lot of attractants, especially out there, that are just kind of a rice bran carrier or a light fluffy carrier with an aroma on them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the deer smells it, they're interested in it, they think with their noses, they go over and they eat it. You're going to get some pictures. But if they don't get anything biologically out of it, there's not a lot of incentive for them to come back. So when we started with the attractant, and I'll get to your blocks in just a second, the attractant, it had to be a nutritionally complete product that they couldn't overeat. And it had to be as or more attractive than everything that we were testing against. And we've been in business now for 10 years. So it's not like we just decided to make a mix that met a label and threw it out there. We've tested these all over the country, every product we have. The only product that's changed in that 10 years was when I started with Monster Meal in 2018. The protein block we had was nutritionally perfect, but it was as hard as a bowling ball and it molded when you looked at it.
Okay.
So at that point, we know, and the basis of that was in the brand development, they wanted the lowest salt content that they could find in it, and they didn't want to put anything in, that was there. And they came up with a really good block, but it really wouldn't break down. And deer not having two sets of teeth, they only have bottom teeth, so they really couldn't work at it. So when I came in, I really, the co-op didn't like replacing truckloads of blocks.
Yeah. I'd say they don't.
And we couldn't ship them at certain times, everything. So we went back and reformulated the block, and we actually came up with a better block from something we learned from our, what we call a pick block, is that we could manage how fast a block broke down. And so the weird part about the block, probably the biggest question I get, is because I'm pretty adamant about, too much protein is not good for a deer. And a lot of people compete. Well, my pellet's 22%. It's probably only 10% digestible protein. So you have this big number that's out there, but it's really low quality protein. They can't digest it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Our pellet is, I'll get into that a little bit later, but we'll finish with the block. The block, we've got it figured out that in most environments, unless you're just super saturated with deer or it rains torrentially for 3 days,
Right.
or if you have a really bad coon problem, because they will just tear it apart. But or bears, they pick them up and carry them away.
I bet bear move it, pick it up, take it where it wants to go.
They pick them up and take them where they want to go. But
Yeah.
it's really gonna time lapse in about 7 to 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
The base of it is our attractant, and then we add roasted soybeans in there, which is what bumps the protein up. And then there's other inclusions in there that we've got a nutritionally complete block that if you want to kind of heighten protein, blocks are just convenient. They don't spill. They time lapse well in front of a camera. They create a destination spot for cameras. I use, like, everywhere I can, I use a protein block and I top it with 6 pounds of attractant in front of a camera. because there's not a deer that gets downwind of that that's not going to come in.
Hmm.
And when I say that, it sounds very sales pitchy,
Hmm.
but if you have looked at the product, if any of your members have looked at the product, what happens is when we formulated it, we also selected from the ingredients, and we had access to every ingredient that gave an aroma profile that the deer had a consistent reaction to. And what we do is we call it a feed receptor reaction.
Hmm.
And the best way to explain that, I think I've talked to you about it, is if they smell it, if you smell food cooking, you
Hmm.
don't have to know whether it's barbecue or Italian or Chinese. You know it's food. And the first thing you say is that smells good. And then you try to figure out exactly what it is.
Hmm.
If you lose that food receptor, you couldn't tell what was cooking food and what was gasoline.
Right.
Right. And it's one of the conditioned responses that deer, all wildlife naturally have, is, you know, the fear receptors. We have triggers in our body chemistry that are fear receptors. They can't ignore those. They can't get used to those. If they smell you, they are going to have they may not bug out, but they're going to take notice.
Hmm.
Every ingredient in ours has an aroma profile that triggers the natural food receptors in a deer. So we don't have to have 5 flavors of something. And for our dealers, that makes a lot of sense because, they don't have to say, do I want the vanilla, the persimmon, the apple, the
Yeah.
banana,
Yeah.
Big
Sometimes you have
Mac.
too many options, Yeah, and
And
then you run out of something. Somebody says, "Well, I'll wait till you restock the vanilla," or something, like
right,
that. Yeah.
you're staring
Yeah.
at your inventory losing money. So
Hmm.
um, it really, it the the first thing about any attractant or feed is that if a deer won't eat it, all the numbers on the bag mean nothing.
Right.
If a deer won't be attracted to it to where they want to return to it, it's not a good camera receptor. It's not a good hunting tool. It can't even increase activity on your property from the standpoint, not from a day-to-day activity thing like most people think of it, but because your feed station, deer change their activity patterns based on prevailing winds and weather patterns and crop rotations and pressure from predators and humans and activity and all kinds of things. But in their route, if they smell this product, one, they'll identify it no matter where they go. And number two, they can't get used to it,
Hmm.
uh, where they can't develop a fear to it, because if they did, you'd have to go back to, they'd have to ignore their natural receptors and the way
Hmm.
their brain processes things. So it's why it works so well. And we've never had, occasionally we'll have a guy that dumps 340-pound bags in South Alabama in July, and the attractant, it's not designed to be fed like that. It's 6 pounds is enough for a hunt for probably 2 days, 3 days, because they can't just hoover it all up. It's granular. They've got to pick it
Hmm.
up. The aroma is still going to be there even if you can't stick your face down and smell it. The deer will find it. And I have my best friend hunting buddy for 26 years. The first time he used it in Kentucky, he was like, "What is in that stuff?" The goat came in 110 yards downwind of me, got right on the crest of that cornfield, and just marched down the field with their eyes open, and came right to it. I'm like,
Hmm.
because they instinctively know it's food. And there's 50 different uses for the attractant. I use it as camera bait almost always. I will use it like if I get in a situation where the deer are all over 80-acre cornfield
Hmm.
and you kind of concentrate movement to one side, or you're trying to really cheat the wind like I always do
Right.
time, and you can use it to manipulate to keep the deer kind of out of your scent cone.
Hmm.
It's another good use for it. But cameras, and if you are one of those guys that feeds a lot of corn, you can mix our attractant in with your corn, and I don't care how many people everybody in Ohio that's ever tried this, everybody in Kentucky that's ever tried this, you wind up with your neighbor's deer because they're not just getting corn now, they're getting all the other nutritional benefits.
Mm-hmm.
And they can identify which corn has it and which corn doesn't just by the smell.
I bet y'all have done a bunch of studies. Just it's so simple to do studies on these things. I bet y'all have done a lot of infield work with that, and
Oh,
seeing
yeah,
what you're. Yeah.
and we've tested the theory in all over the United States. I mean, from Washington State to Texas, the Southeast, the Upper Midwest, the Northeast. Because you can't bait in most of the Northeast, but you can in a few states. Essentially, the other thing is how I started to really research this when I started for the co-op. The co-op manufactured a lot of the triple clean corn that was available within the industry. Your Walmart, Tractor Supply,
Mm-hmm.
Academy corn, they bagged a ton of it. Some of it was apple flavored corn. Some of it was, whatever flavored corn. And I really want to know if there was a difference in the way that the deer reacted between flavored corn and unflavored corn. So I put 2 feeders 20 yards apart with a time lapse camera, like a plot watcher camera.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned consistently, no matter where we did it, was initially the deer will go to the more aromatic corn, but within 2 days, they kind of figure out it smells different, but it's just corn. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting anything here that, I can look all day for the apple that's supposed to be here, but it's not here.
It's not one here. Mm-hmm.
And then you'll start to see what is a normal pattern, which if you've got food sources close to each other, you'll see the deer stratify based upon social structure,
Mm-hmm.
Age, sex differential, things like that. And that we repeated it. God, we did it in, I think, 11 states.
Mm-hmm.
And we never got any different answer. But when we mixed the attractant in with a corn, the social structure became apparent day 2. Like, the most dominant deer would eat on that, but what happened was they would consume the corn, averages about 3 times faster than just regular corn,
Right.
out of the same feeder that was right next to it.
Right.
But they would start to feed in shifts.
Hmm.
Because and it's usually does. It's not bucks or anything like that. It's does get very protective of food sources, like
Mm-hmm.
super protective. They will beat the snot out of other deer, especially if they have fawns. There are some very selfish does out there that don't have fawns that just like to get fat.
Right.
We like to put them in the freezer, and but it's fun watching the deer react to the product. Everybody thinks that all we want is a cheap and easy way to a big deer.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is any feed program is just augmenting natural habitat. If you don't have good natural habitat, you're not going to have big deer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you couldn't afford to feed them enough. You just can't. Well, there's people that can, and Texas is loaded with them.
Yeah.
And
That's like a whole different country, as far as the way hunting is.
And they're so far ahead of the curve. When I get down there, they have been there, done that, got the t-shirt and left. Like, there's nothing to tell them that they haven't figured out themselves. With most of those big ranches, it's a balance between cost effectiveness and results.
Mm-hmm.
But I know people that feed 30 tons of pellets every 2 weeks. Those are high operations, but it's amazing they go through. But they're contained animals that have degraded their habitat because of the stocking rate. So if they feed them, they can't get the results out of them.
They leave. They have to leave because they have to go find food. They starve to death.
And in a lot of those cases, they can't leave because there's a 12-foot fence there.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So, and exotics are a whole nother thing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that became glaringly apparent when I started was hogs are naturally attracted to everything we have.
Mm-hmm.
Exotics. It works with exotics. We haven't found a wild animal that won't eat the attractant.
Mm-hmm.
If they won't, they don't naturally eat grain anyway. Like But we've got pictures of mule deer. I've got pictures of sheep in Arizona
Hmm.
on our attractant and our mineral. Both of them, moose, elk, mule deer,
Mhm.
won't hurt any of them. As soon as I say that, there's usually 15 comments about you're going to give all of our deer CWD. And if you have about 11 hours someday, I that is a near and dear to my heart.
Maybe on my trip, maybe on my drive to Oklahoma or something, I'll say, hey, I'm gonna be in the truck for 13 hours, 16 hours, whatever I do. I don't even know how long that drive is sometimes.
I'll bore you to death. And it's just my experience going back to BSE, mad cow disease.
Mm-hmm.
I worked with the USDA back then, and it was a big thing because it had not been identified. But we are really ignoring a lot of the research that came out of scraping and BSE,
Mm-hmm.
trying to apply it to what we're doing. And if you ever want an interesting thing, try to find the actual number of symptomatic CWD cases. That means a deer walking around emaciated.
That's when it's crazy because CWD was an issue. Several different states in the United States had it 10 years ago, right? But it didn't make its way to Tennessee. That's where I'm from originally. It didn't make its way to Tennessee. It's only been there like 5 years. And what happens is it's like everyone, nobody cared about it until it was in their face, right? But what I've seen in just this short period window of time, it takes a long time to dig up and discover scams a lot of times, right? Like it just does. Like if somebody, an agency tells you, hey, here's what's going on. This is, we need to have these eradication efforts. We need to do all this management. We need, they're getting paid. They're getting paid because they found CWD. All right. But what happened? There was an official. There was a official person with the agency that falsified tons of documents. And when that came out, that was CWD had only been around like 3 years, and he was falsifying all these documents and saying it was over here and these and falsifying all these results on these tests and sending all the stuff in. And it just totally like any trust that was there, because there's very little trust with CWD stuff anyway. All the trust that was there got cut. But you still, like, they make the rules, right? But the thing is, like, our issue is educating non-hunters, non-hunting landowners that they don't have to let them on their land. They don't have to let them on their land to set up the sharpshooters and to get their tallies, right, where they can test and test and test and kill these perfectly healthy looking deer and discover that they test positive for CWD. And the thing is, that deer was perfectly healthy. It died from you shooting it, right? And just like you said, you won't see one walking around. You will not see one walking around. And the thing is, they waste away. It's not. We aren't talking about EHD, which happens very, very fast. When deer get that, like you think about all the ones we see in ponds, standing in the middle of a pond, and and they're dying, rapidly, right? We're talking about something that they're supposed to waste away. That like they burn the calories because they're not eating, right, and they're just walking around. It doesn't happen. Like I have not seen a single video, and you think about how, like, there's more. I think that there was I'll stop with this, but the statistic I saw said there will be more photos took this month, by people, more photos taken this month by people than all of history, right? I mean, that's how readily we have cameras, right? All of on our phones and everything. You won't see it. You will not see a deer that's wasting away.
And they tell you it's a slow degenerative process. Okay. Now, CWD was identified in 1967 in Colorado. If it were a transmissible disease using normal infectious means, you'd have a radial dispersion pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would go out. Now, first of all, we didn't start testing for that until 30 years after it was identified outside a government research facility. And the tinfoil hat people come out immediately when they realized that it was done. I've heard that it was a disease designed to kill all the sheep and goats in the Middle East. If we were going to have a conflict there, they were going to let it loose. I mean, I've heard a lot of things. The bottom line is this. There's no radial transmission model. It pops up. If you test for it, the game agencies really hate me when I sit in a meeting and I say, okay, if the prion is what causes the disease to transmit, at what level of prion exposure is a deer susceptible? Okay, in order to get the flu, you have to be exposed to enough of the virus to become infected.
Mm-hmm.
If it does transfer in urine, feces, and saliva, which is the justification for the non-concentration of deer, okay, how come we can't just give them an oral swab and get a presence, as I hate the term positive, because
Right.
it is presence absence of the misfolded protein. It's not, once they identify it, they can't say, okay, once we identify this protein at this stage, this deer will not live more than 10 months, 24 months, 48 months, whatever, and if they do, it's like 7 years because it's an aging disease. It's
Mm-hmm.
literally, when you look at the response, and this was my argument, in New York State, they found 2 deer in 2001, I believe it was. One was at a rehabilitation service. The other one was just outside of the rehabilitation service. And there's some question as to how the samples were processed, right? But we have not identified another presence deer after spending 40 some million dollars testing deer in the state of New York. We have not had a presence positive test in the state of New York. And we have one of the most restrictive feed bans. In 2017, APHIS, the Animal Plant Health Inspection Service, came in and said, if you want government funding from the USDA to combat infectious diseases in deer like CWD, you have to have a CWD containment plan.
Mm-hmm.
It must be an approved plan. So
Mm-hmm.
in the plan, they gave you, and don't hold me to the number, but say they gave you 15 options. Your plan had to include 8 of those options in order to be approved by the USDA, so that if you did have a problem and federal funding was available, I've never met a government agency that didn't like federal funding.
Right.
So of course they're not gonna not develop this. So they start these aggressive testing programs. The all tests by law have to default to a positive if there's a question.
Mm-hmm.
So
Wow.
usually what happens is you do one test and it's called a presumptive positive. And then you do a second test, and if you get a negative, you run a third test.
Okay.
Okay. Now, in CWD, if you run a positive, even if you get a negative as the second, it still defaults as a presumptive positive. If you get a positive, you have a true positive, but it's still just saying we detected the misfolded protein, or
Mm-hmm.
it actually works off uh, an amino acid enzyme that's only present when that protein's present, right? So, and it's not 100% accurate. No test is. None of them are. There's if you go to like antibiotic testing, they're highly sensitive and highly accurate. But you can mess the test up. So with a sheer number of tests, you're going to wind up with some default positives. And if CWD was a problem and it was an expanding disease, which they could tell you all the time, we're finding more and more and more and more of it. There's no way that you can do more tests and not have the baseline, what we call the incidence of occurrence, follow the line of testing.
Right.
Okay. So if you run 10,000 tests and you get one positive, if you run 1,000,000 tests, you should get the same amount of positives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And in science, that's called a baseline of occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
Baseline of occurrence. Okay. In a normal, curve of things, it's just here at this level. When we say we've got a flu outbreak, the reason it's an outbreak is it's occurring at a higher rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Within a population segment. And there's so many things about CWD that don't make biological, scientific sense. That, and there's other mitigating factors that we're now subject to. And I get accused all the time of not caring about the deer, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, listen, if we don't have deer, I don't have a job, right?
Right.
If we don't have deer, one, I feel responsible in the few cases in my life where I have wounded a deer and not recover it. I guarantee you, I feel worse about that than the average person who hits a deer with a car and it runs
Mm-hmm.
off.
Mm-hmm.
One is a conscious choice, one's an accident. I get it, but I care about the deer, but I think the reaction that we should be having, should be tempered now that we're closing in on 50 years of data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And, there's another contingent that really just wants to eliminate captive cervids, whether they be elk or mule deer or whitetails or whatever. And, they point to then why is there such a higher occurrence in captive deer if it's not a proximity disease? You go back in 1969, most states banned the interstate transfer of live deer or the introduction of deer from wild herds.
Mm-hmm.
So now what you have as a genome. And now that we use AI, we start transferring it all over the place because we're getting semen from Pennsylvania and breeding
Right.
deer. And right now, it's not an irresponsible thing. It's done in cattle all the time. But if a particular buck that becomes very popular has a precursor, a predisposal to this misfolded protein, one, captive deer breeders are not walking out. If you talk to these guys, they've never been at a point, and they've got something like 112 times the occurrence that wild deer have in it.
Mm-hmm.
I only know like 5 that have come out with a really old deer and said, you know what, when that one started to decline, we had her tested and it was CWD.
Hmm.
So
Yeah,
if you
you would think that would just. I never thought about the captive herds. See, I always think about the wild ones, and then we don't see them. Well, they don't see them in the captive either. Like it's not.
well,
It's wow.
they're so advanced now that they're breeding out. They've kind of identified the family groups, and that all came from when BSE came out. One of the first things that the USDA did, that the Canadian Department of Agriculture did, is they were old kill cows that were testing positive or showing up with these shaky signs, right?
Mm-hmm.
They were 9, 10, 11-year-old cows. I defy you to find a farmer who can't tell you where most of his cattle came from,
Right.
especially brood cattle. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They know they can go back, track receipts, do whatever to find out. They ear tag them for a reason. Stockers are turned so quickly that it really doesn't matter. But what they did was they literally tried to identify every cow that was still alive that was ever born to that cow or any of that cow's offspring, and they went and they killed all those cattle.
Mm-hmm.
We have not had a BSE positive in a decade, right?
Because of that reason.
For the reason for that is, why did they go after specific cow families? Because they understood that it was probably, like other spongiform encephalopathies, a genetic predisposition to the disease. And by eliminating that, Scrapie is a almost perfect case study where it was isolated to one ram family and one breed at one time. So we've got great data to go off with TSEs, and they made it sound like a zombie. I spoke at a TSE symposium, and I said, gentlemen, I'm sitting in a group of scientists. If I said there is a new disease out here, we'll call it a disease because everybody calls it a disease, that we know is transmissible by a protein that can lie latent in the soil for 20 years, it can be transferred through plant uptake, and not only infect a species, can infect things transgenous. You would tell me that that was something out of Star Trek, but that is the story that you're trying to get everybody to believe.
Right.
And I get it. We want to preserve our resources, right? But by the time they instituted all these rules, CWD was discovered or identified 30 years before that. And there is no known study that I've ever seen where CWD can be attributed to a mass casualty event. And I only have to drive about an hour, and I can find EHD about every 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay?
And see, the money, like, the idea is, like, it's bad business for the scientist to say, hey, it's not really that big of a deal, because they literally put themselves out of work. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's bad business for them to say that. Like, hey, here's our study. We've we tested, and I don't even know if there's a test you can do. Like you said, you can't do a mouth swab of them and tell that they have it, they have the prion, but like they don't have a, I guess you could watch the deer, but still you'd have to, even if they had it present at time of death, you still don't know when they got infected. So you really need to know when they show it, and then you could track and see how they do. But like you said, that it's not that doesn't exist. It's much like we experience globally. Yeah, that's right.
It's more prevalent in bucks than does, and that in genetics that's called a sex-linked trait. And the other thing is that you don't have 2-year-old deer dying or showing symptoms of CWD. It's an aging, and so as we age, our bodies change. I'm 53, and I'm telling you, I am not 25 anymore. Okay?
Yeah, right.
Things do not feel the same way. Our body chemistry changes, just like every other living creature. And I think that just like people are predisposed to certain diseases, this prion starts to become more prevalent in the aging process. And certain deer are just genetically predisposed to it, but it's an astronomically small percentage of the wild cervids walking around out there that are even potentially carriers.
Right.
So we're chasing our tail a little bit when there's other things. One, those are tax dollars. They're Pittman Robertson dollars. They're USDA slush fund dollars. It's not. And I'll tell you what, the deer industry, and I'm like the deer industry is an interesting industry. I'm not. I like wild deer. Captive deer are fine, but it's just not my cup of tea. But those dudes put way more money. They're just like farmers in that they don't want to see their livelihood or their passion go away. They put more private dollars. The state of Texas and Pennsylvania deer farmers have put more money into the private research of CWD than probably every game agency in the country. And they're not even invited to the table because the game agencies say, well, you've got a reason to disprove anything that we want.
And just like I said earlier, like, I mean, when the money comes from a source that it's ear tagged for CWD research, and then if your research shows that, hey, it's not really that big of a deal, that person is gone out of that working group. They're not going to let them stay.
It's absolutely correct. Like, no, the government has never used money from sources that were supposed to be for one thing for another thing. It's never happened.
Yeah. There's a bunch of stuff out right now about losing money and everything. I lost Blake, so he just got off here, but I think it's about time for us to wrap things up anyway. But appreciate let's see. Yeah, there he is.
Am I back?
Blake, that kind of gave us a break there, and I was going to tell everybody pretty much out of time anyway. We're going to do a follow-up. We're going to do some follow-up posts and stuff. Thanks for coming out, joining us. Again, appreciate supporting the league, and we're having a good time, and I look forward to seeing you enter some deer. Anything you want to say before we sign off?
Yeah, one, I'm excited to be involved with the Bowhunter League. We'll probably start our own team this year, not that we're going to have a snowball's chance of winning, but and number two, send Ben any questions you have for me. I can give you my opinion. They're just my opinions. I can defend them pretty well because I do it just about every day. If you have questions about the product, just reach out to us. We're on Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. Send us a message, and I'll be sure to get back to you.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, man. Yeah, we'll do a post and stuff where people can see contact stuff too. This probably later this week or this weekend. So appreciate it.
Perfect.
Have a good evening, man.
Have a good night.
Thanks.